is Tina Meier. Tina is the founder and the executive director of the Megan Meier Foundation. I'll let Tina explain kind of what the foundation is and give you her story. But Tina's based in St. Charles?
Correct.
Yes. I was going to say St. Louis area. I took a shot with St. Charles. So
Yeah.
Tina's in St. Charles, so she's local to us in Missouri. But she's going to talk about bullying and cyberbullying and some things to watch for, signs for us to be able to watch for in our kids in our after school programs. And then just kind of what is bullying, some definitions and those kind of things. So we will leave time at the end for some questions. Like I said, if you do have questions as we're going through, as Tina's talking, you can just post those in the chat box. And we have a couple of us that'll watch that chat box. And we'll write those questions down and then be able to ask those at the end. And so, Tina, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thanks so much for being with us. I'm excited to hear what you have to tell us today. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me. One thing I always want to start out with my presentations is that, especially right now in the world that we're living in with the COVID and all of the uncertainty that we're dealing with, things are really, really heavy. And even though this presentation does have heavy parts, my hope overall is it to really be more of an inspiration that sometimes we do go through things that are tough and they're hard. And we do find a way through to try to help other people. And the other piece is to really help bring some of that awareness and education so that we can see the signs to be able to help kids that are struggling, provide resources to parents. And if we can do that one by one, we're making a difference. So to give you some background, I started the Megan Meier Foundation in 2007. Our mission is to support and inspire actions to end bullying, cyberbullying, and suicide. Now, this was not something that I went to school for, to be a public speaker or on these topics. I learned about it firsthand from a tragedy with my daughter. But since that tragedy, I have traveled now for the past 12 years to 39 different states and spoke to students and parents and educators in communities that are schools, public and private and suburban and rural and inner city, talking about these issues, really listening to the issues that educators are going through, that parents are going through and students are going through. And so everything that I talk to you about today is coming from me, experienced and talking through all of that. I'm not a licensed therapist. I don't provide legal advice, just to make sure. This foundation, the name of it, Megan Meier Foundation, started because of my daughter, Megan. Megan was my firstborn daughter. She was, of course, to me, the most perfect kid in the entire world, like we all think. But Megan was that girl that struggled. She struggled with her body image from kindergarten. And, you know, you think kindergarten, kids are so young. I mean, we look at all the world problems that we have and you think, okay, a kid's worried about this or about that. Come on, it's not a big deal. And what I would always do with Megan when she would come home and say, you know, Mom, kids are making fun of my legs. You know, I'd say, your legs, what do you mean? And she would say, they tell me that my legs are too big. They tell me I'm tall. They tell me I'm a giant. Megan was not an overweight child, but Megan was not a tiny petite girl either. Megan really looked like she was in second grade compared to those kids in kindergarten. So she did look bigger than them. And kids noticed this stuff. Well, at the time, I always thought, you know what, listen, I'm going to support her. So I would say, Megan, honey, just ignore those kids. Come on, you're perfect the way you are. Don't worry about what those kids say. You're beautiful the way you are. Well, I thought that that would work. You know, I would always try to support her. I was brought up in the age of, you know, Tina, turn the other cheek, be the better person. Don't lower yourself to the other person. So it wasn't that getting back at the other kid. It was control what you can control and we kind of move on. Well, Megan, moving into third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, struggled. In third grade, it was to the point that Megan said she wanted to kill herself. And as a parent, I had no clue what to do. I thought, third grade, how does this child have any idea what that word means. And I took her to the pediatrician. The pediatrician said, Tina, she needs to be evaluated. And I took her to a psychiatrist and psychologist, but it took me several months to finally get in. And they diagnosed Megan with depression and attention deficit disorder, ADHD. You know, when your child first is diagnosed with these issues or these mental illnesses, many parents always look at themselves and think, what have I done wrong? You know, how could I not make my child happier? What am I doing? Why does it look like everybody else, they're doing fine, their kids are fine, it's just me? And so I struggled with that a lot, thinking that there was a way that I could change the environment, do something. But I quickly realized that I did need to do therapy with her, and we did need to do medication, which we did. Now, Megan started doing somewhat better the rest of elementary school and then went into middle school. The important thing I want people to understand, especially for you working with these kids after school, you're seeing these kids after they've been through school all day long. So they've been going through ups and downs, good days, bad days. You're seeing all kinds of things. And many times they probably start to crumble or break down a little bit when they finally get to you, because they've had to go through that whole day. Now, if I would have called the school and said, Megan is getting picked on, she's getting called names, she's coming home crying, and the school would have looked into this, they would have not seen that Megan was by herself. We always think of a kid who's being picked on or bullied, they're sitting alone by themselves, or we're gonna physically see what these other kids are doing. You wouldn't have seen that with Megan. You would have seen that she sat with kids at lunch, and you would have seen on the playground that she was playing with kids, and you would have seen in class that yes, she was talking with kids. The reality was for Megan is that she wanted to fit in with the popular kids. These were the kids that really controlled how everybody else controlled the rest of the environment in the school, in those classes. It was the kids of you wanted to sit next to them at lunch. You wanted to be picked on their team on the playground. You wanted to be invited to their birthday parties. You wanted to be in that in group, because if you were outside of that group and they picked on you, your life was miserable. And for Megan, especially having ADHD, she was that kid that could be really, really, really sweet. She could also be that kid that could get on their nerves at times, you know, because she tried so hard to be accepted. And so we always had this fine balance of dealing with that. Megan, through the rest of elementary school, went into middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. 6th grade wasn't quite so bad. 7th grade was horrible. Megan had boys who started stomping behind her in the lunch line, calling her a fat cow and an elephant, making animal noises, to the point that Megan stopped eating lunch. Now, Megan didn't run home and tell me about it. She didn't tell the teachers about it. She wanted to keep it hidden because, one, it was embarrassing. 2, if she came to me, she knew that I loved her with every ounce of my heart. But I was the mom that would say, which when she finally confessed to me what was going on, I was the mom that said, Megan, honey, don't worry about those boys. Honey, listen, you're great the way you are. If you ignore those boys will get bored and tired and they'll move on. Those were the words that I said to Megan when I found out what the boys were doing. It was not that it did not break me apart inside. It made me angry what these boys were doing to her. Absolutely. But I also knew I couldn't control the boys. I also knew that if I could get Megan to just try to ignore them, maybe try to move away from them, maybe they would leave her alone. That was what I was hoping for. Unfortunately, that did not work. Megan did not want me to go to the school when I said I'm going to go to the school and talk to them about this, because she was worried that it was going to make it worse. And unfortunately, Megan was right, like the majority of kids are right. So you will hear very often when you find out a child is being picked on, bullied, cyberbullied, something going on, a lot of times they will say, please tell the teachers, please don't tell the principal, please don't tell anybody. The reason that they do this many times is because if you think about it, when somebody goes and tells the principal, now they have to call in the other students that are involved. unless there is a video camera, unless there is a person, an educator, an adult that sees this and hears exactly what is happening, when it's happening, understands that it's been repeated, understands that it is directed towards that kid and what the intent is, that many times they cannot apply these disciplinary actions to them. Kids are going to say, no, I didn't do it. No, I had no involvement. I don't know what they're talking about. And many times what happens is the kids will get retaliated against more. They get called names more. They get laughed at more. And so that is why when we've done these surveys, about 70% of students, middle school and high school, do not want to tell a trusted adult. And the way I get adults to understand this is because we always say to kids, listen, unless you come to me, I can't help you. I've got to do something, because as adults, we're there to fix it, right? We need to be the fixers to help them. But think about it in your workplace, okay? You have another coworker, you have a boss who is derogatory, saying insensitive things, inappropriate things, many different things that are happening. You do not want your loved one to come to work and talk to your boss about how the other coworkers are being towards you, right? You're not going to want that to happen, because if you do, even when you go in and talk to them, what ends up happening when you keep complaining, keep talking about it, who becomes the problem? You become the problem, not the person that's causing it many times. And so then what we see is it kind of does this reversal piece. And so we've realized that when we're talking, we have to make sure that we understand why kids are not coming to us and talking to us and telling us about it. And it's because of those concerns that they're scared about. With Megan, though, the thing was, her year was going so bad, no matter what I did, no matter even talking to a couple of her teachers, no matter her counseling, whatever we were doing, the child was absolutely miserable. And we decided to switch her to a different school for her 8th grade year. It wasn't that I thought this school was going to be perfect. It was just, I thought we needed a fresh start. And it also wasn't the fact that school was a bad school. It wasn't. It was the fact that the school cannot control what children say up and down the hallways. You know, after school, they can't control every aspect of that. So I thought if I switched her to a different school, maybe I could help her have a fresh start. When Megan started this new school in 8th grade, it's kind of crazy. You'll see kids that go through elementary school and into middle school, and they're in these very awkward years. And then all of a sudden they start coming into themselves. They start growing, and that's what Megan was doing. And she started almost peeling off the labels. You know, between that summer of 7th and 8th grade, you know, she started a program, her and I did, through Children's Hospital. And it was a program of eating healthy, living healthy. And we started going to these classes together. She started feeling good about who she was. And that's what I was always wanting her to do. She started a volleyball team at the new school, making new friends. And my kid, who would look in the mirror and cry no matter what she put on or what she was doing, finally started looking at herself in a different way, not in an arrogant way, but in a way of she didn't see those disgusting fat legs anymore, and she didn't think that she was this horrible person. And I was finally grateful that she could smile. Now the 8th grade started, and the wonderful world of technology and the World Wide Web came around. And this was where MySpace was huge. And some of you may have even had your very own MySpace yourself. MySpace was the big thing because it was MySpace and AOL Instant Messenger. And every kid in middle school and high school wanted to have this because that's what everybody else was doing. Megan begged to have an account, and I was the mom that watched way too many How to Catch a Predator and 2020, and I was worried about sexual predators. And I said, Meg, listen, that's dangerous. No way, no how. Well, she drove me nuts about every 20 minutes for probably 2 days solid. I finally gave in, but I had really strict rules. The rules were, listen, you can have an account, but I've got your password. You know, your profile is kept private. I have to approve anything going on your pages. We always had computers and open spaces. And back then, this is way back when then with dial-up internet. And I also had a program that monitored every instant message and website she was on. Megan told me I was a warden of a prison. I think she thought I was the most strict, ridiculous parent in the world. And I was strict. And the reason I was strict was because my kid had struggled for so long. And I knew she was the one that always wanted to be accepted. And she was finally doing good. And I was concerned about who on the outside would tell her that she looked pretty or was nice, and that Megan would kind of fall for that. So yes, I was concerned. But Megan started this MySpace account. She added her old friends from her old school, her new friends from her new school, and things were going great. About another 3 weeks in, she gets a friend request from a boy by the name of Josh Evans. She didn't know the boy. I didn't know who the boy was. And she said, "Mom, can I add him, please? He is so hot." Now, those were Megan's words. She was almost a 14-year-old girl. And I said, "Meg, honey, do you know who this is? Is it a friend of a friend?" She's like, "No, Mom, just please, he's hot." I said, "Okay, Meg, here's the thing. I will let you add him, but anything negative, anything sexual, and he's deleted immediately." A lot of you out there, which I hear it all of the time, is, listen, you're the parent. You control this. You tell her no. I also knew my kid. Even with dial-up way back when, Megan, all she would have to do was go to a friend's house, go to the library, create a fake account, add him, and I would have no clue. And I knew my kid, she would have done that for sure. And when we have done surveys throughout schools over the past 12 years, and we've asked middle school and high school students, how many of you have added somebody because you thought they were hot, because you thought they were cute? How many of you have just added somebody? And you will get at least 2/3. They don't think it's a big deal. They think that they're certainly, because there's space between them, this is just technology. It's not like meeting a stranger in person. So they feel it's a little bit safer to do that. The reason I let Megan add him was because then at least I could monitor it. Then at least if there was something going on, I could be there to help her. I'm going to play a video from the Dr. Phil show that will finish the rest of Megan's story. And if for some reason some of you can't hear it, Brad, if you can let me know to turn up the volume. But I'm going to go ahead and play that now.
Cyberspace is the new venue for the schoolyard bully.
Well, it's a story that's made national headlines. 13-year-old Megan Meier committed suicide after being bullied online by who she thought was a teenage boy. But little did her parents know at the time that the bullying actually involved their adult neighbor who lived just 4 doors down. And the whole thing, the whole person she was talking to on the website was a hoax. It was a made-up person. Take a look.
Megan was 13 years old. Megan had a MySpace account, and she had become friends with a boy named Josh Evans and corresponded for roughly 4 to 6 weeks.
Megan received a message from Josh Evans stating that he did not want to be friends with Megan any longer, that he heard she was not a very nice person. Megan was absolutely getting bombarded with these insults. And she said, "Mom, they're just being mean to me online." I was aggravated, so I had my voice raised with her. You knew better than to stay in the MySpace. You knew the rules. She was really upset, and I said, "Megan, I am really disappointed with you." And she said, "You're supposed to be my mom. You're supposed to be on my side." And she took off running upstairs. And those are the last words that she said to me.
Tina came into the kitchen, and we were talking about basically why was Megan on the computer.
Then all of a sudden, my heart just dropped. I just had this horrible feeling. I turned around and took off up the stairs.
I heard this god-awful scream. Tina called 911. Tina and I rode along in the ambulance with her, and we got to Children's Hospital, and they put her in the ICU. October 17th, on Tuesday, she finally passed. They took all the cords and IVs and everything off her. We just laid in the bed and held her.
It's just the most horrible feeling that I've ever felt in my entire life.
About 6 weeks later, we received a phone call from a neighbor down the street.
She told us that she had information that the neighbor, Lori Drew, was responsible for creating this fake MySpace account. Megan had known her daughter since the 4th grade. They'd spend the night at each other's house. Lori Drew and her daughter, they created this MySpace account as a joke. They wanted to find out what Megan was saying about their daughter. Lori Drew confessed in the police report that that's why she created this Josh Evans account.
I do blame Lori Drew for what happened to Megan, without a doubt.
We were connected with the FBI, and through the investigation, we found out later in the spring of 2007 that there just was not a law that they could fit it into.
The Drew family totally played us like fools.
It is cyberbullying to the 10th degree. And the fight to me now is to fight for justice, for the laws to change. This is not just things that you see on TV. Megan was a real person, a real girl with real dreams.
I show that video not to try to make it more intense or to people to be sad. But I think that our world, obviously right now, with everything going on, is so filled sometimes with sad stories and tragedies, and sometimes to get up and out of bed, to listen to the news, to hear about the things that are happening. Sometimes it gets so big that we sometimes kind of try to push it down. And what I want to make sure is that when we hear about real stories from real people, it sits, it resonates, and that we remember those things. So if we can remember Megan's story, to be able to then be able to now think of those other kids that you're around, those people that you're around, and remember the story, and then say, you know what, that kid is struggling. Something is going on with that child. If that's what that can do, that's my whole purpose of bringing that forward. Many people have asked a lot of questions throughout the years. Some of them are, how did you deal with it after Megan died? Did you forgive the people? And truthfully, it's taken me a long, long time. But I am still not there on forgiving the mom yet, and the mom and the dad. I did forgive the 18-year-old daughter, and I did forgive the daughter of the parents. I personally did that, not to their face, but in my own space, I did that. I am hoping I one day get there, and I always talk about this when we talk about bullying, we hear about why do people get people back, or why do you get so mad? When somebody does something to us or hurts us or hurts our family, it's almost that thing of you want to make them feel what they've made you feel, right? And so in that case, I wanted, after all of this happened with Megan, I wanted this family to feel what they have made me feel. And I am grateful that we had people that supported us, that we did not go and act on that. But I talk about that a lot because when I talk to kids, about when they say, well, they disrespected me, or they're talking about my family, or this is happening, I'm going to get them back. They did it to me. And so we sit down and really pull apart that of how that rage and anger and hurt feels, and why do we want to get people back? But we have to also think about, is it going to change the outcome of what happened? Is it going to change the fact of what they said? Is it going to change? Are they really going to feel the way that you are feeling? And so that's one of the amazing parts that I talk about. The beautiful part of Megan's story is that while I wished I could go back and change what happened, it's also her story and her life has allowed me to work with students who sometimes are struggling so intensely, to be able to connect with them, to be able to get them to open up and think about things a little bit differently. And that's always the hope of what you guys and what you do. You are sometimes there to be able to just be, to be present, to be stable, and to support these kids while they're there. One of the things I also explain is that, when it comes to the internet and cyberbullying, The thing is, I truly don't believe that this family, the mom, thought that Megan was going to take her own life when they created this fake account. I think they thought it was just a joke. It was just funny. And that's the reality, that sometimes when we create fake accounts or, do things to other people online, we don't think it's a big deal because it's through a piece of glass. But the reality is we don't know what somebody is feeling on the other side. And so a lot of our presentations really form around empathy and thinking about where we would be if we were in that position. How would you feel? What would you need? And so those are ways to be able to kind of incorporate Megan's story and talking to kids about these types of things. The big thing I want to press on is that that bullying and cyberbullying are not a direct link to suicide. It does not mean that a child who is bullied or cyberbullied automatically is going to think of self-harm or suicide. That's not the case. But we do know that children who are over periods of time going through bullying, going through cyberbullying, they do have a higher likelihood to have thoughts of suicide. We do know that suicide is the second leading cause of death. And in the state of Missouri, we have a very high rate of youth suicide. A new study from the CDC came out and stated that the suicide for kids 10 to 24 years old has increased over the past 10 years by 56%, which means that we have a lot of work to do. It means that we need to be able to train all of the staff that work within schools, before school and after school and within schools, and programs to make sure that they understand what the signs are, what to do, and how to be able to help those kids. This is Thomas Joiner's theory. It is very hard sometimes for people to understand when they hear somebody is talking about suicide or says, I don't want to live, or I don't, my life is horrible, it sucks, whatever it may be. Sometimes we're looking around at the other things that people are going through, and we look at this kid who is struggling even more, and another kid who's just lost a parent, or another kid over here who's going through something more horrific. And what we do is we many times kind of compare what other people are going through, and then we're kind of like, come on, what you're going through is not a big deal. It's fine. Stop being so selfish, or, do you see what other people are going through? The reality is that person that's going through something does not see what other people are going through. They're living in their pain at the moment, at that time. And many times they think that their pain is the deepest pain. So it's not that they're trying to, push it on to other people. They just are in so much pain that many times they can't see others. What Thomas Joiner's theory is, and he is a professor who studies why people die by suicide. His theory is there is thwarted belongingness, which is I am alone. So these kids, these adults can feel that they are alone. There's perceived burdensomeness, that they are a burden, whether it's families, whether it's to their friends, that there's a capability for suicide, that they're not afraid to die. And if they have that desire for suicide and you have all of those together, then you will see in that small piece where there is a suicide or near lethal suicide attempt. And to explain this to you in a way that it's very hard to see when you're looking at somebody and you see that, well, listen, I'm there supporting them. They have parents that are there supporting them. They've got friends. Look at their coach, on their team. They're helping them. They go to church. They're supporting them. They're not alone. After Megan died, I can tell you that I fit into all of these circles. I have never attempted suicide. I've lost my dad and my brother. Never thought of suicide. But when Megan died, I prayed to die, is what I wanted, because the pain was so intense, nothing anybody could do could change it. And I had that thwarted belongingness, that I'm alone. Even though if you looked at me, you would have seen that I had my other daughter, I had my whole family, all of these supports that were surrounding me. It did not look like I was alone. It looked like I was smothered by people. But I felt like I was in this black box with like 10 foot of fog around me, and I could see the people, but I felt like I couldn't even reach out, touch them. It was just like I was slowly drifting down. That burdensomeness, I knew I was a burden. I didn't feel like I was a good mom. My daughter just took her own life. I've got a 10-and-a-half-year-old daughter. I can't even be there as a mom now. I knew I wasn't a good daughter. I couldn't talk to my mom. I wasn't a good friend. I absolutely thought I was a burden. And then the capability for suicide, I'm not afraid to die. I prayed for it, because even the love that I had for my other daughter, the pain was so intense. I just wanted it to stop. And everybody would say, it's going to be better, Tina. You're going to be okay. There was a reason that people say all kinds of things to try to support you. But the reality was the pain was so intense, and going through it every single day was absolutely exhausting. And I thought, how am I going to do this for the rest of my life? How is this going to be? I can gratefully say that 12.5 years later, that through going through that deep grief of day in and day out and crying and going through all of those steps, you know, having support and going to counseling. Honestly, they couldn't fix it, but they listened to me. And that was really important, to have somebody independent from my family to be able to support me. And I can say now that I can smile and I can laugh, but life will never be the same. My life will never, ever be the same from the day that my child took her last breath. But I always want people to understand that there is help for people who have thoughts of suicide or attempting suicide. There is help, there is support. But I think if all of us that can understand this diagram right here, to understand it's not so simplistic as, come on, suck it up, it's going to be okay, that maybe we can have a little bit more compassion, listen to them, support them, and get them help that they would need. When we talk about, is it bullying? Everything seems like it's bullying when it's happening to you, when it's happening to your kids. So it's really that bullying is a complete description. It's not just somebody being rude. So if you think of somebody being rude, saying something unintentionally or hurtful, and they say it once, explain to the child that what they said was rude, and that it still is hurtful. It still can hurt your feelings, but it is not bullying. When somebody is mean to you, intentionally mean, so they are directing something to you, saying something mean, hurtful, that is mean, that is hurtful. But if they're doing it one time, it is not considered bullying. It's mean and it's hurtful. And validate how that child feels. So making sure and saying, listen, I hear that you're hurt, or I hear that you're embarrassed, and if that was really mean. Let's think of what can you do now that it's happened one time. What are some things that we can do? How can we help you through the next time? If it happens again, what can we do? And then bullying is, and I've got a better description on the next page. So what they are saying, the CDC and a panel of experts have updated it since 2014. And what they're saying bullying is any unwanted aggressive behaviors by a youth or a group of youths who are not siblings or current dating partners that involve an observed or perceived power imbalance that is repeated multiple times or highly likely to be repeated. Bullying may inflict harm or distress on targeted youth, including physical, psychological, social, or educational harm. The thing with this is that repeated negative words to another kid, repeated and directed towards them, that is considered bullying. Repeatedly taking their belongings, flipping them off, spitting on them, moving their books, those things are definitely repeated bullying. The things that we don't get to see, we can see the physical part, and many times we can hear the words. The part that we have the hardest part on is that social relational part, which is the rumors that go around, the isolating the kids, telling them don't go sit next to her, don't go play with her, don't do this, don't invite him over. And when they repeatedly do this and isolate these kids and spread the rumors, it can be very, very hard for us as adults to know where it started, where it ended, because kids are not going to be truthful and say, yes, I started that rumor. Yes, I did tell everybody not to go see them. That doesn't happen very often. So it's just understanding that those things do happen. Now, the important thing to understand is that even though you may not be able to directly pinpoint who started it, where it began, what we can do though in those times is listen to that child and validate it. It does not matter if you do not believe the kid. If you do not believe the kid that comes up and says they're spreading a rumor about me, and you do not believe it, the worst thing that we can do as adults is act like we do not believe them. What we can do instead, because what they will do is say we don't listen, we don't care, and unless we can absolutely prove it, we don't know. So what we can do is listen to them and say, you know, tell me what's going on. Actively listen to them. So look at them in their eyes, and then you can validate how they feel. Remember, it's not their behaviors. You're not validating their actions. All you're doing is validating how they feel. And say, I hear that you're hurt, and I hear that's really upsetting. That's got to be really hard. What can I do? How can I help you? What can we do now? To then be able to get them to be able to think about some ways to be able to move forward with this. When we talk about cyberbullying, it's really an extension from everyday bullying. Studies have recently shown that in-person, in-school bullying has actually gone up 35% over the past 3 years. So if you think about it, all of these programs, all of these things that we're doing to talk about bullying and cyberbullying, suicide awareness, are continuing to go up. It's not to mean that the things that we're doing are not helpful. I think it is that we try to do piecemeal things. So we'll try to talk about it one day, have a presenter come in the next day. But I think it's really important for schools to be able to make sure that they have something that is cohesive, that is throughout the year, that talks about mental health, talks about suicide awareness, talks about many different facets of this, so that we're consistently talking about it and it's upfront. But the thing about cyberbullying is it's the use of technology. So it's willful and repeated harm inflicted through the use of computers, cell phones, or other electronic devices to harass, threaten, and humiliate others. When we think about where does cyberbullying take place, anywhere and everywhere. It is happening on Google Docs. So when you are having Google Classrooms, and this, I just saw a post the other day from a parent who was horrified because the child in elementary school was working on their class project on the Google Docs. Well, then they went into a separate room, and now they're creating some different documents, and they're creating different chats now talking about other kids. And this is all happening under the umbrella of them being able to go to school. So does not matter if it's TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, ask any of these things that are out there. The reality is if children have access to these, it is the people have an ability to be able to cyberbully another person. The things that we have to understand and know is that many times these kids will do it in ways to be able to be anonymous. So that's a very easy way for them to be able to do it, to create anonymous Instagrams, to be able to create Twitters, different things that are out there, because then when they're doing this, they can get other people on board and they feel that they are anonymous and no one is going to catch them. The reality that we talk to them about is that anybody can be caught, that there is records of every single thing that we upload, that we download, that we have on our phone, instant messages that go back and forth, making sure that text messages going back, we have an ability to be able to get that information. The important thing to understand is that we as everyday citizens cannot get that information. What happens is if you think that somebody is being cyberbullied, say that you have a child who is repeatedly getting some horrible messages from a group of kids, and they are calling that child names, saying they are going to, you know, blast out certain pictures online, and the child is hysterical. The thing to understand is that when that happens, you want to be able to make sure that you have the child keep and record anything that's on there. So take screenshots, keep all of the evidence that they can keep from what is being sent to them. And then you obviously would want to take them to the principal, whoever it is within that school district that you work with, that then will take those things into account. You want to make sure that they have all of that. The reality is that unless it is a true threat, unless somebody is threatening harm to that person, to themselves, to a school building, to a building, anywhere within that town, many times if that happens, there's a threat, the police obviously are going to get contacted. The police will get involved, come in, and if they do that, then they may do or issue a subpoena to be able to get records of everybody's text messages, all of their social media, to be able to see what was going on. If it is typical back and forth name calling, that is horrific. Many times you can't figure out where it's coming from. The police are not going to get involved many times because they're going to say, listen, we don't have the manpower to handle all of these things. And what will happen is the schools will tell the kid, just, get off of it or block the person. And there's many different ways, which I don't have a lot of time to go through all of those steps today. But if any of you do want steps on how to be able to handle that or to pass on to children or you as parents to know, we do have step-by-step steps on what to be able to do if you are dealing with that and going through it. But the reality is it is very complex, and it's not just as easy as that we have a law in the state of Missouri, which we do, that you can say, okay, there's a law. They sent 3 text messages or 3 things on Instagram, and automatically it's going to be considered cyberbullying, and the police are going to get involved and they're going to get in trouble. It does not work that way. It's unfortunately much more complex than that. One thing we want to understand about social media is the emotions that kids are going through. It's really no different than us as adults going through it. I know that I have to check myself every single day. When you are, especially right now in our world where things are so heavy and so much uncertainty, we are grateful if we know that our friends and family are healthy and safe and we're able to pay our bills and a roof over our head. That feels good. But then all of a sudden you get on social media and you start scrolling through and you start seeing that there is a sad story after another sad story after another sad story, and it weighs really heavy on you. Or you might start seeing that it looks like maybe you're struggling and everybody else seems to be doing great. They just got a promotion. Through this pandemic that we're going through, they've been able to pivot and now their business is booming and you're struggling. Their children just got accepted to an Ivy League school and you don't know what your child's going to do. There's so many things that when we scroll through and look at social media, it's so many ups and downs that sometimes we feel that we are less than. We're not keeping up or doing enough. And this is exactly what kids are going through. It's their connection. So we don't want to get rid of their connection now. But it's really important for them to be able to understand, or us to understand, that they are going through this. So say that they are not being cyberbullied, but say that a group of kids are now, doing a group chat. They're texting back and forth, or they are, back and forth talking on social media, and your child was not invited. They were not included in it. Doesn't mean they're being cyberbullied, but that feeling of isolation is real. That feeling of being left out is real. And so many times what will happen is you will see them on social media and it can be really good and fun. And then all of a sudden you can kind of see them go into this shell where they don't want to talk. They're struggling with it. So what it means is not to be able to jump in their face and say, is somebody cyberbullying you? Is somebody leaving you out? Is somebody being mean? Because they're going to completely clam up. Sometimes what you can do is say, man, I was going through social media and sometimes I struggle with it too. I struggle with figuring out, am I doing good enough? Am I enough? I see all these people doing great things and that's sometimes hard. Do you ever struggle with that? And that way you can open up a dialogue and a conversation with them versus them always feeling like we as adults interrogate them. The important thing to understand about bullying is that this truly does affect these children's brains. So when children are repeatedly bullied and repeatedly cyberbullied, their brains can look like children who have brains of children who have been sexually or severely physically abused. They can respond to everyday stresses like combat soldiers with post-traumatic stress syndrome. They can have lifelong problems with cortisol and adrenals leading to chronic health problems. And they can show signs of dysfunctional thought processing, chronic depression, and anxiety into adulthood. So these are not just the sticks and stones anymore. You know, words don't matter. No, words do matter. And they really can impact the brains of our children. So how can we create a healthy school climate? And I'm going to go through some of these a bit more quickly because of making sure we have time in the end for questions. Studies show that in a positive school climate, children do better academically. They engage in fewer risky behaviors. They feel better about themselves. They attend school more regularly, and they engage in less bullying and other behaviors. One of the things that many times these kids all have in common is a supportive person within that school. It is somebody that they connect with. So it does not matter. You don't have to be this scholar that teaches them all kinds of wonderful things, but maybe you are that person that listens to them, that smiles to them, that is consistently there, that supports them, that if they do need some help, that you're able to get them help or play a game with them, help them with their homework. Sometimes these small things that you're doing every single day, besides the big things, we don't realize the impact that it has on these children's lives because they don't have that consistency at home. So please know that no matter what you're doing, when you sometimes feel like you're not getting very far, that when you're sitting there in that space with those kids and listening to them, you are making this huge difference for them. What can schools do? So say that right now, it would be a really odd situation. Say that you're going to be doing some online programs with the kids, maybe now or after over the summer. If it's happening and it's between, there's a situation where a child says something to you and says, hey, listen, I'm being cyberbullied by these kids, and they send screenshots to tell you what's going on. You certainly can contact your school principal, whoever that is in charge, and ask them kind of how to be able to respond to it. The thing is that there's going to be a lot of other legal issues that are going to be happening because what typically happens is if a situation happens in school, physical fight, cyberbullying situation, they can prove it happens, then guess what? Schools are going to step in and they're going to address that issue. If it happens outside of school, the only way that schools are going to get involved, if one, it substantially materially disrupts that learning environment. It interferes with the educational process or school discipline. It utilizes school-owned technology to harass, or it threats another student's rights or infringes on their civil rights. So what I would err on right now is if there is a child who is going through this, to ask them to please get that information. You need to maybe find out and talk to your school ahead of time and say, hey, listen, you know, if this does arise, what is the protocol? What are the steps? How are we going to handle this? Because if you're going to be doing a Zoom class and all of the kids are on, guess what? It may interfere with that educational process and materially disrupt that learning environment if that kid will not get in that classroom or you cannot work with them together. So you do need to contact your school to find out what do we do if this happens and how do we handle it? Who can I direct the child and the child's parent to? Warning signs that a child is being cyberbullied or cyberbullying. There's many different warning signs, but one of the biggest things that you're going to notice is your child or these children are going to withdraw. You're going to start seeing their behaviors changing. So noticeably rapid or increased or decreases of the device. So maybe they are constantly on texting, but you can tell that their behaviors have changed as far as their facial expressions. They seem sad or mad, or they're laughing. That they exhibit emotional responses, laughter, anger, upset, to what's happening on their device. If they hide their screens or device when others are near, to avoid discussions about what they're doing. Sometimes it may be their privacy. I get that. But if you start seeing things that don't seem right, and they're laughing and they're showing other people and they're laughing, and you may want to be able to ask them what is going on and what's happening with that. Social media accounts, especially if you're a parent, social media accounts that are shut down or new ones appear. If a child starts to avoid social situations, even those ones that they enjoyed in the past. So even if you're in an after-school situation and you're actually in school when we all get back there again, and you see a kid that normally enjoyed hanging out with some other kids, but is not any longer. Those are times where it's going to be really important to be able to see, you know, what's going on, or talk to me. Can we talk in a private space? Tell me what's going on. How can I help you? It may have nothing to do with the other kids, could be something completely different, or it could be about those children. So that's where it's then going to be really important to be able to address situations, talk about issues of bullying and cyberbullying with your whole group, not pointing kids out, because that does not work, but then being able to have class of talking about it. How do we include people? What do we do regarding empathy and understanding? Definitely what we're going to see a lot of is a child becoming withdrawn, depressed, loses interest in people, activities. Many times they shut down because they don't know how to be able to express what they're feeling. Sometimes they don't know what they're even feeling. And so when they start pulling back, or they're very short in their responses, sometimes pressing them is not going to work. So sometimes giving them a little bit of space. And when they have kind of taken a deep breath, or you can say, hey, listen, I can tell you're struggling with something right now, and I can see that's hard. When you take a deep breath, or if you need some time, if you want to come back and talk to me, I will listen to you. And, I can help in any way I can, or I can just be here to support and listen to you. That really means a lot to kids in that moment. What we can do preventing it. I think what we've always done is, as adults, is we want to tackle a problem, fix it, and be done with it so we can move on, because there's so many things that are going on in our lives. And the reality is that we as adults have gone through bullying. We've gone through, well, I guess it was cyberbullying, but it used to be, you would prank call people, you would hang up on them, you would do all of those things that you did before you knew what was going on. And we think, we all got through it. Come on, sometimes you have to deal with, not everybody's going to like you. The thing that we have to be able to do is understand that our world is definitely different today. So if you think that your child is being bullied or cyberbullied, make sure that you do talk to them privately. Don't blast it out in front of a big group of kids, because they're going to feel intimidated and embarrassed. If you believe a child is being cyberbullied, you want to speak to that parent about it and talk to them about what can be done to help that child. Many times parents will say, well, I'm calling the other kid's parent. That's what I'm gonna do. And you have every right to be able to do that. Typically what we suggest is that's not the best option. It's strictly because every parent is going to really protect their kid. They're going to believe their kid. Every once in a while it's worked out good, but typically what happens is the parent's gonna say, well, yeah, I heard your kid did this, or I heard your kid did this to my kid. So you know what, I'll tell him to stop, but listen, don't come to my door and tell me to stop it. You need to take care of your own house. And then all of a sudden parents get into it, and then parents start putting it out in social media, and now the kids are dealing with it. So now it's become this big, huge deal where it maybe wouldn't have blown up quite as much. So there are definitely steps to be able to look at when we're dealing with that. I think being a role model is huge. So if you live at home and you put out, and it's even with your own children, and you put things out that maybe are not always appropriate, maybe have some, maybe there's conflict with religion, with politics, with other people, then your children see the same thing that's happening. So it's, again, we have to be able to be role models, to be able to understand what do we do, because our kids are going to see everything that we do on social media. And believe me, they would love to jump down our throat and tell us what we're doing wrong if they have a chance to be able to do it. So we try to lead by example. I activities that you can do. So not every school needs every single formal program, right? There's a lot of things that you can do. And what we've learned with kids is a lot of it is discussion based. It is just sitting and talking about situations that are happening. In those times, you can get amazing work done. So internet and library searches, looking up different types of bullying or cyberbullying. You can do presentations, discussions about it. They can even do creative writing to talk about it, artistic work, and classroom meetings. Some of the places that I absolutely love, and I do not have anything more than a high school degree, but when you can sit down and talk with kids, and when you really believe in what you're doing, and you listen to kids, you actively listen to them versus we always telling them what to do, and you can sit in a kindergarten circle on the ground and you give everybody kind of the space to be able to say, talk to me about what you guys are seeing, what works and what doesn't work, what are we as adults doing right, and what are we not doing right, how can we be supportive, in talking to them, because what we want them to be able to essentially start to see is that we as adults can be there to support them. The reality is that it is peer to peer where we make this huge difference. So if we can build empathy, get kids to understand that another peer seeing a situation happening and pulling that person away from the situation, just saying, come on, just ignore them, come with me. Or, you know what, listen, stop it, leave them alone. Or go tell an adult with them. Those things are huge with kids versus it being us as adults intervening. The last two slides is what are things that we as adults do that work and don't work. The least likely is you should have done this, you should have done that, you should have done this. If I wouldn't have acted this way. Those are the things that are least likely to work. The things that helped the most were connection, supporting, and reframing. They listened to me, encouraged me, and checked back with me over time to make sure I was okay. What we need to remember is that it does not say fixed it, because we can't always fix these situations that are happening. Peer-to-peer strategies, the things that worked the most, the least one was confronting the bystander. So if I see that somebody is getting made fun of, and I go up and make a big ordeal and I scream or yell at the other kid and say, stop it, how can you be so mean, what's wrong with you? Then that can make this situation worse, because now other people are seeing it happen. Now what happens is the teacher or an adult comes out and hears it happen, so they separate me as the person standing up, they separate the person who is doing it, and they separate the target. So now they don't have any peer support, and that really is hard for them. The thing that they say helps the most is included me, spent time with me, walked with me, talked to me at school, encouraged me, gave me hope, helped me get away, made a distraction, and helped me tell adults. I'm going to flip through some of these at the very end, and this I'm going to go to this slide. So say that some of you personally or through the AfterSchool network realize that you have some kids who are struggling. And I truly believe that we are going to see more kids struggling, needing more mental health supports now throughout the summer and going into next school year. We don't know exactly how this is affecting children yet, but we do know that them being home, hearing all of the stressors that are happening, that they are struggling. So if you, on the state of Missouri, we have sales tax that we all pay. Part of that is these different counties have taken that sales tax and had it passed to be able to provide mental health supports in their communities. So if you look at all of these, I clicked and I have made sure all the links work. So Jackson County, Lincoln County, Franklin County, St. Louis County, Boone County, City of St. Louis, Jefferson County, St. Charles County, and Lafayette County. All of these areas have passed this legislation, and they provide supports to children. So our foundation in particular, and a lot of them do it, is we are now providing free telehealth to children in our area, free of service. So that is something that if you look on these and you know somebody in your area, to check to be able to see, are there some services that can offer telehealth now during this pandemic and maybe help that child as they're going through some of those situations. And now I will leave it up to the Q&A. I tried going through as fast as I could, so I really appreciate everybody's time and I appreciate being here. I hope it was helpful.
Yeah, so thanks, Tina. We've had a few questions pop up. If you do have questions, if you want to go ahead and post those in the chat box, Clint and Mark, if you guys can kind of keep track of that over there. So there were two questions that kind of are the flip side of the same coin, it seems like, Tina. One is, what do you do when the child begs you not to take something to the school? And then on the flip side of it is, what if the parent has repeatedly gone to the school and nothing seems to happen?
Right. So I think that each situation is going to be a little bit different. I think that if you have a child and they have begged you not to go to the school, and you have listened to them and you've tried different alternatives and said, okay, I'm not going to go to the school now, but what are things that we can do, right? So if it's these same kids, do you have to walk in the hallway with them, or do you have to pass by them here, or where are these situations happening? Because I will tell you right now, there is not one perfect solution. I wished there was. It's trying to work around that. If you've tried doing those different things and it continues to happen, then I would talk to your child and say, or to the child and say, okay, listen, I know you have asked me so many times, but this has progressively gotten worse. And I can't sit by and watch you continue to go through this. So let's find out, what is it that you need? What is it that you need to feel safe in school? And then what we can do is, when we meet with the school, explain and make sure that they understand how important it is that the child is petrified of retaliation, right? So how do we work on a plan to keep the child safe if it's continuing to happen in this class or on the school bus or in different ways? What can we do? The one thing I can tell you, and we have a tip sheet that we send out to parents many times, is if you've gone to the school many times, in that situation of a parent that says, I've gone to the school, and nothing happens. That does happen. But what we suggest is when this happens and you report it to the school, document every single thing that you're doing, okay? Who you talk to. If you're emailing, we want to make sure that you email, that you are, copying or CCing the principal or a school counselor or a teacher on it. We want to make sure that if it's a situation, don't just email the teacher, make sure you're emailing and CCing the principal and the counselor on it, because many times it can kind of get disjointed in different places. If you've done that and you've gone several times, and say that you now realize, okay, listen, I need to document that I talked to this person, I did this, I did that. Get all of that together and type it up in bullet points from the time that it started to where you're at right now. The biggest problem that we have is parents want to know, I want to know what you're going to do to that kid or those kids that continue doing this to my child. What disciplinary actions are you going to take? What are you going to do to make them stop? In the state of Missouri and in the United States, through the Department of Education, we have FERPA, which means that it is a law that states that they will not give information, it's private information, about what they're going to be doing with another student. The only way that they can release what disciplinary actions they take or do not take is if that guardian or parent signs a release to be able to do that. Other than that, what's going to happen is the school's going to say to you over and over again, I understand what you're going through. We are taking it. We're going to be reviewing it. We're going to be talking to them. We will make sure and investigate it. And then many times you don't hear anymore, and parents and kids get so frustrated. So what we have done is we talk to parents about flipping it. Instead of going in and focusing on what are you going to do with that kid, instead focus, and you can document everything you've done and say, these are the things as a family we're doing, right? So we are making sure to block if they're continuing to target him or her online. We are making sure to stay away in different situations or do different things, not respond. What we want to know is, what are you going to do to keep my child safe while they're in school? So while they're going and passing to this class, they have a class with that child. I want to know how are you going to keep the child safe now on the bus if it's happening on the bus? What you want to be able to do is talk to them about that safety plan, and then you want to make sure that you have a meeting. Request in writing a meeting with your document that you have that's all bullet pointed, and you need to take deep breaths, meditate. I don't care what you need to do before you go in. If you go in and scream and yell as much as we want to because our kids are being hurt and we're scared, they're not going to listen to you. If you go in and threaten that you're going to get an attorney, they're going to stop talks with you. They're going to have their attorneys step forward. So what I suggest is taking a deep breath and saying, I'm scared. I'm concerned for my child. We're doing all of these things. We need your help as a school. We need to work together. And this is what we're doing. This is what we need. We want to make sure that they're safe and working on those plans. So if anybody ever wants anything like that, we send any of those supports and resources out. You can call us, email us at any time, and we try to help you through that. But that has been the best resolution of working with schools versus going the other way.
Great. Thank you, Tina. Another question that was asked was, is there any way to report bullying to the social media platform itself? Yes.
So on our website, and you can also go to, if you go to cyberbully.us, they're a great organization that they do all statistical research and data on cyberbullying. But if you go on our website, we even have links that you can click on to be able to go to, whether it's Instagram, Snapchat, whatever it may be, to be able to report it. And even on the app. So look on those apps. But what you definitely want to do is report what's happening, take a screenshot of it, keep it, print it out, whatever you may do, but then make sure that you do report it. And you sometimes have to report it several times for them. Now, understanding that when it's happening online, if they do not view, if Snapchat does not view that it is violating their terms of service, they are not going to remove that content. So sometimes it's not as simple as you report it and they remove it. Sometimes you may have to report it several times or other people reporting it.
Okay, Mark, you took down a question before you start though. Somebody asked about the websites for the city. So maybe Tina, if you could back your slide up just to that Sure. one with the has the resources, and hopefully that will answer that question. So Mark, you took down Cassandra's question. You're muted, Mark.
Yeah, let me go back here. I have the different questions. I went ahead and tried to copy and paste them so I could see them all. One of the, there were a couple of questions in here. One of the things that was asked, Tina, was should the CDC take out certain information about partners and siblings when it comes to their definition of bullying? Is that?
The reason is because when they updated that in 2014, that's when they included siblings and dating partners. It's many times because the dating partners starts to become to dating violence. And so it's really hard to be able to change that. And then when you're dealing with in-home situations that are happening with siblings, you can't, so it's within the schools is what school districts and people working within the schools can handle. The only way that you can handle something happening inside of a home is that if you are seeing that the child is, if there are some sort of being harmed or violence against them and you have to report it. So I think that's why the CDC and other partners really got together and changed that, because they were really kind of separate things.
Okay, so somebody had asked just a little bit up about taking something to the police. When
Yes.
when do you take that step?
So I believe that you take the step if there is somebody who is threatening harm to you, to anybody that you know, and I'm talking about I'm going to bring a gun and shoot you, or I'm going to come blow your house up, or I'm going to come to school tomorrow, any of those things and harm you or harm themselves. You want to take a screenshot of that instantly and you want to call the police. Now, if you're in school and there's a situation that's happening and a kid runs up to you and says, hey, so-and-so just sent this to me and said that they're going to do this. They're going to kill themselves, or they're going to come kill somebody else. What you want to do is make sure somebody else is there to watch the other kids, and then you immediately go to the principal, the person that's in charge there, to make sure that they know what's going on. There may be a school resource officer that's there right there at that moment in time. But what you want to do is make sure that you take the child, take the device, and that you take them to the proper person within the school. If it's happening outside of school, or now you're doing, virtual learning and somebody says that's happening, you want to be able to find out, okay, do you know who the person is? Do you know where the person lives? And then you want to get that information, and either if a parent is around, can I get your parent to maybe be able to get on screen and talk? And we need to make sure that you call the local authorities. If you're concerned, you can certainly call the local authorities. But anytime there's a threat of violence is when you absolutely get the police involved. If you think that there is something going on with taking nude or partially nude photos or videos or any of those things, that is something where you definitely want to contact the police. One big thing to do is do not have a child. If a child says, a kid just sent me a nude photo, it happens, okay? You do not want to say to them, okay, get that off of your phone, send it to me, and I will report it to the authorities. Absolutely do not do that, because the police department cannot say now that you say, oh, well, I'm not a sexual predator, I had the kid forward it to me. You are now an adult with child pornography on your phone, and they can charge you. So you absolutely do not ever let them forward it to you. You always tell them, listen, where's it at? I need to get your parent involved. We need to make sure and contact the police and have the police handle it that way. But do not ever. We've heard horror stories about teachers trying to do the right thing, and it's backfired on them.
Yeah, it's great advice. So one last question before we take off. Somebody mentioned that they didn't see their county on the slides. So who would you recommend them to contact?
So you know what? The guy that I think is one of the best is actually Bruce Sawatsky, and he is with the St. Charles County Children's Resource Board. That's who we go through. But he has really worked with a lot. He's been doing this for over 20 years. So he works with a lot of other agencies, helping them start. So in order to be able to do this, that means you have to get legislation passed in your county to be able to get sales tax to be able to be funneled to these services. So it certainly can be done. It is so beneficial. And I think that if you ever wanted to start something like that in your community, I would check with Bruce, he's the executive director there, but also check with your local government and see what they're doing. Have they tried this in the past, and see what they're doing.
All right, great. So we're 4:18. We're going to go ahead and wrap up. So Tina, thank you. And if you can stick around for just 1 minute when we finish here. Thank you all for joining us. Tina's PowerPoint, and then we'll have some resources as well. We'll post that on the MASN website. Probably go up maybe tomorrow, probably early next week, that we'll get those up there. Tina, if you want to put your last slide up there, just with contact information, website. So there's information on the Megan Meier Foundation, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all of those things, places you can follow Tina. So if you do have further questions, you can email them to me. I can get them to Tina, or you can contact her. I would think contact her directly.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And ask her. So thank you all so much for hanging out with us. Tina, again, thank you.